Welcome to 2026. As the clock struck midnight and we ushered in this new year, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I've come in just 12 months. Happy New Year to every single one of you listening. Before we dive into the wreckage of my past life, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from and what the local time is for you. Also, since we're celebrating the start of 2026, how do you say Happy New Year in your native language? I love learning about the different ways our global community marks a fresh start. If you find value in these stories of boundaries and balance, please consider supporting the channel. Your engagement keeps this community thriving and allows me to share these moments of hard-won clarity. The Chicago wind was howling off the lake, turning the freezing rain into needles that pricked at my skin as I stood on the porch of my childhood home. It was late December, that strange, liminal week between Christmas and the New Year when time feels like it's standing still. Inside, the house was a humid bubble of roasting meat and the cloying scent of pine, scented candles, but the warmth felt suffocating rather than welcoming. My hand was inches from the door handle when I heard my name. It wasn't spoken with affection, it was spoken with the clinical detachment of a butcher discussing a prime cut of beef. Elena doesn't even use half the space, my brother-in-law Marcus was saying. I could picture him leaning back in my father's recliner, probably holding a beer I'd paid for during my last visit. That penthouse in the West Loop, it's wasted on a single woman who spends 80% of her time in hotel rooms or airport lounges. Chloe needs that space for the nursery. The air quality alone in Elena's building is better for the baby's lungs. I froze. I am a quantitative risk architect. My entire professional life is dedicated to identifying vulnerabilities, calculating the probability of failure, and neutralizing threats before they manifest. Usually, I do this for multi-billion-dollar hedge funds. I never realized I had a massive, unmitigated risk living right inside my own DNA. She's heading to Geneva for that 4-month consultancy project on the 2nd of January. My sister Chloe's voice rose, thin and practiced in its fragility. She won't even be there. If we move in while she's gone, we can establish ourselves. Dad, you said the laws in this city favor the occupant. Once we're in, she can't just throw us out into the snow with a newborn. It would look monstrous. It's not just about how it looks, my father, Arthur, interjected. His voice had that low, authoritative rumble he used when he was justifying something unethical. It's about family equity. Elena has more than she needs and Chloe has less. We're just rebalancing the scales. Once Chloe and Marcus get their mail delivered there and change the utility accounts to their names, they'll have legal residency. An eviction in this district takes a year, maybe more. By then, Marcus will have his new firm off the ground, and they can find their own place. Elena will eventually see it was the right thing to do. She's always been the logical one. She'll adjust. And the best part, my mother Martha added with a soft, chilling chuckle, is that she's so desperate for a real, family Christmas that she'll be too distracted to notice us swiping the spare key from her coat tonight. We'll have the nursery painted eggshell blue before she even clears customs in Switzerland. I stood there in the freezing rain, my expensive wool coat soaking through, and I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't the hot, blinding flash of anger I expected. It was a cold, crystalline silence. It was the feeling of a spreadsheet finally balancing out to zero. For 32 years, I had been the reliable one. I was the scholarship student, the high earner, the one who paid for the cruises, the medical bills, and the investments that always seemed to evaporate. I had spent my life trying to buy a seat at a table that was only ever interested in the depth of my pockets. I took a deep breath, adjusted my expression into the mask of the dutiful, slightly tired daughter, and pushed the door open.
Merry Christmas, everyone!
I called out, my voice bright and hollow. The silence that greeted me was frantic. 4 faces snapped toward the hallway, eyes wide with the raw panic of thieves caught mid-heist. Then, the theater began. Martha rushed forward, her face contorting into a mask of maternal joy. Arthur stood up, smoothing his sweater, while Marcus and Chloe shared a look that was supposed to be subtle but felt as heavy as a lead weight.
Lena, you're early.
Martha cried, pulling me into a hug that felt like being wrapped in a spider's web, sticky and insincere. We were just talking about how much we're gonna miss you while you're in Geneva. I missed you all too, I lied. The words felt like ash in my mouth. As I sat at the table, picking at a roast that tasted like cardboard, I watched them. Truly watched them. I had excused their behavior as quirky or demanding. I had rationalized Chloe's constant need for money as a result of her autistic soul, and Marcus's string of failed businesses as bad luck. But looking at them now, through the lens of the conversation I'd just overheard, I saw the truth. They weren't my family. They were a predatory ecosystem, and I was the primary energy source. Marcus was already eyeing my watch, a gift to myself for closing a major deal. Chloe was rubbing her stomach with a theatricality that suggested she thought the baby was a shield against any accountability. And my parents, they looked at me with a terrifying mixture of pride and greed. They were proud of the resource I had become, but they had no interest in the human being who had worked 90-hour weeks to build it. So, Elena, Arthur began, leaning forward as he poured a glass of wine I had brought, a $300 vintage they were gulping down like soda. Tell us about this Geneva trip. Total privacy for 4 months, right? No one checking on the penthouse, complete radio silence, I said, smiling softly. I'll be working in a secure facility. Very limited contact. I was actually worried about the place sitting empty. Pipes freezing, that sort of thing. I saw Marcus kick Chloe under the table. Well, Chloe said, her voice dripping with fake hesitation. You know, Marcus and I were thinking, if you're really worried about the place, we could always keep an eye on it for you. We could even stay there a few nights a week to make sure everything is running smoothly. That's so generous of you, Chloe, I said. I could feel the coldness in my chest expanding, a beautiful, numbing ice. But I wouldn't want to burden you, especially with the baby coming. It's no burden, Marcus insisted, his eyes gleaming. Family takes care of family, Elena. That's what Dad always says, right? Right, Arthur agreed, raising his glass. To family, to looking out for one another. I raised my glass too. To family, I echoed. And to everyone getting exactly what they deserve. They cheered, oblivious to the double meaning. They thought they had just won the lottery. They didn't realize they had just walked into the center of a controlled demolition. The next 48 hours were a blur of high-stakes logistics. I didn't go to sleep when I got back to my penthouse that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and began the process of de-risking my life. First, I called a man named Silas. Silas is a developer I'd worked with on a distressed asset project 3 years ago. He was the kind of man who saw buildings not as homes, but as puzzles to be solved and profit to be extracted. Silas, I said, my voice steady. The West Loop penthouse. Are you still interested? The historic industrial conversion. Alana, you told me you'd never sell that place. You spent 2 years restoring the original steelwork. Things change? I said. I want a cash deal. I want to close in 48 hours. And I have a very specific condition for the sale. I'm listening. The price is $750,000. That's nearly $200,000 below market value. But the buyer must agree to begin a full-scale structural gut renovation at exactly 9:00 a.m. on January 3rd. I want the interior walls gone, the plumbing disconnected, and the windows boarded up for replacement. I want the unit to be completely uninhabitable by noon that day. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Silas was a shark, but even sharks are surprised by a bloodbath they didn't initiate. You want me to destroy a masterpiece for a discount. I want to remodel. I corrected him. And I want the new owner to have the legal right to clear the premises of any debris the moment the clock strikes 9. Do we have a deal? Send the contract, Silas grunted. I'll have the wire ready by Tuesday. Next, I turned my attention to the ledger of infringements. I had been the unofficial CFO of my family for a decade. I had access to all the accounts because I was the one funding them. I spent the night systematically cutting the cords. I canceled the emergency credit cards I'd given my parents, which they had been using for luxury spa days and high-end groceries. I called the insurance provider for Chloe's premium healthcare plan, the one she insisted on because she didn't trust public doctors, and informed them that the policy would not be renewed for the coming year. I contacted the bank holding the private loan for Marcus's latest disruptive tech venture, a loan I had personally guaranteed. I initiated a transfer of that liability back to the primary signatories, using the legal loophole Marcus had been too lazy to read when he signed the paperwork. By sunrise, I was no longer a daughter or a sister, I was a ghost. On the morning of December 31st, I began the process of staging the penthouse. I didn't move my furniture out. That would have tipped them off. Instead, I hired a junk removal service to take everything of actual value, my custom-built servers, my art collection, my grandmother's antique desk, and move it into a secure, climate-controlled storage unit under a corporate alias. To replace it, I visited the most depressing second-hand warehouses in the city. I bought a sofa that felt like it was stuffed with wet hay. I found a dining table that wobbled so violently it couldn't hold a glass of water. I replaced my high-end appliances with broken floor models I found for pennies. I wanted the place to look furnished from a distance, but to feel like a trap the moment someone tried to live in it. Finally, I prepared the gifts. In the center of the master bedroom, the room Chloe had already claimed in her mind, I placed 4 beautifully wrapped boxes. They were adorned with gold ribbons and elegant tags. I placed them on the scarred, second-hand mattress I'd dragged in to replace my luxury bed. The note I left on the kitchen counter was simple. Welcome home. I've decided to let you have the life you've always wanted from me. Everything you need to manage your new reality is in the boxes in the bedroom. Happy New Year, Alina. On January 1st, I didn't go to the airport. I went to a high-end hotel under a different name, one with a view of the city skyline. I sat by the window with a glass of sparkling water and watched the city breathe. My phone started vibrating around 60 odors p.m. The first call was from my mother. I didn't answer. The second was from Chloe. The third was a text from Marcus. "Hey, we're at the place!" The key worked. This place is a little different than I remember. Why is the couch so sticky? Anyway, thanks for the housewarming gifts! We're opening them now. I imagined them in that bedroom. I imagined the greedy excitement as they tore into the gold paper, expecting jewelry or cash or the deeds to the property. Inside Arthur's box were the receipts for every penny I had spent on his pension gap over the last 5 years, along with the legal notice that the payments had ceased. Inside Martha's box were the canceled credit cards and a list of local debt consolidation charities. Inside Marcus's box was the paperwork showing he was now solely responsible for his failed business loan, with a court date already looming. And inside Chloe's box was the cancellation notice for her health insurance and a bill for the back rent I'd calculated for every time she'd stayed with me and borrowed from my jewelry box. My phone didn't just vibrate then, it screamed. Call after call, text after text. "Elena, what is this? This isn't funny, pick up the phone. Where is your stuff? Why is there a hoe won't turn on, Elena?" I turned the phone off. I slept the best sleep of my entire adult life. January 3rd, 8:55 a.m. I was sitting in a quiet cafe 3 blocks away from the penthouse, wearing a hat and sunglasses. I watched as a convoy of white vans pulled up to the front of the building. On the side of the vans was the logo for Silas's construction firm. A crew of 12 men in hard hats jumped out, carrying sledgehammers, industrial saws, and rolls of plastic sheeting. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, they entered the building. 10 minutes later, the screaming started. I saw my father first. He ran out onto the sidewalk in his pajamas, his face a bright, dangerous shade of purple. He was waving a handful of papers at a foreman who looked like he'd been carved out of granite.
You can't be in here?
Arthur shrieked.
This is my daughter's home. We have residency, we have mail.
The foreman didn't even slow down. I don't care if you have the Pope's blessing, pal. This property was sold on the 29th. The new owner wants it gutted. We have a permit, we have a police escort arriving in 5 minutes to clear the debris, and we have a schedule. Move or get covered in dust. Next came Chloe, wrapped in a thin blanket, sobbing about her condition. Marcus followed her, trying to look tough but looking instead like a man who had just realized his parachute was actually a backpack full of rocks. Martha was last, clutching the gold-wrapped boxes as if the paper itself could save them. The sound of the first sledgehammer hitting the interior walls echoed out into the street. Shirasike, it sounded like a bone breaking. It sounded like a liberation. From my seat in the cafe, I watched them huddle on the sidewalk in the Chicago cold. They had no keys to their old house. They'd left them inside the penthouse in their rush to establish residency. They had no functioning credit cards. They had no health insurance. And they had a demolition crew literally tearing the roof off their stolen sanctuary. They looked small. For the first time in my life, I realized they weren't the giants who controlled my destiny. They were just people. Selfish, short-sighted people who had finally run out of other people's lives to burn. I finished my coffee, stood up, and walked in the opposite direction. I had a flight to catch, but it wasn't to Geneva. It was to a small, quiet town in the south of France where nobody knew my name, and where the only strategic risk I had to manage was whether to have a second croissant. 6 months have passed since that morning. I'm sitting on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean now. The air smells of salt and lavender, and the only sound is the rhythmic pulse of the tide. My life is smaller now, but it's mine. I work as a freelance consultant, picking and choosing projects that interest me. I don't have a penthouse, but I have a home where the door is only opened by people I trust. I received a letter last week. It was forwarded through 3 different shell companies and 2 lawyers. It was from Chloe. Elena, it began, the handwriting shaky. I don't know where you are, and I don't know why you hate us so much. We've lost everything. Dad had to sell the house to pay off Marcus's debts. They're living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a part of town you wouldn't even drive through. I'm working at a grocery store, Elena. I'm 8 months pregnant and I'm on my feet all day. Marcus left. He couldn't handle the pressure. Mom cries every time she sees a picture of you. How can you be so cold? How can you live with yourself knowing your family is starving while you're off playing God? Just send us something. Anything? For the baby. I read the letter twice. A year ago, this letter would have shattered me. I would have been on the first plane back, checkbook in hand, apologizing for my cruelty. I would have taken the blame for their failures, as I always had. But as I sat there in the sun, I felt a strange, quiet sense of peace. I realized that I wasn't the one who had made them lose their house. Arthur's greed did that. I wasn't the one who made Marcus leave. His cowardice did that. And I wasn't the one making Chloe work on her feet. Her sense of entitlement, the belief that she never had to plan for a future, because I was the plan, had done that. I wasn't playing God. I was just finally allowing the laws of physics to apply to them. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. They had spent decades acting without consequence, and I had been the one absorbing the impact. I had simply stepped aside and let the impact hit the people who had generated it. I didn't burn the letter. I didn't cry over it. I simply stood up, walked over to the stone wall at the edge of my terrace, and let the wind catch the paper. I watched it dance for a moment, a small white speck against the vast blue of the sea, before it disappeared into the waves. I have a new ledger now. It's a small leather-bound book I keep in my bag. But this one isn't filled with debts and infringements. It's filled with things I love. The color of the water at noon. The way the local baker remembers my name. The feeling of waking up and knowing that my time, my energy, and my heart are no longer up for hostile takeover. They tried to steal my sanctuary. They tried to use my own success as a weapon against me. They thought they could erase me and keep the spoils. But they forgot one fundamental rule of risk management: the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the most power. It's the one who has finally realized they have nothing left to lose by walking away. As we move further into 2026, I hope you find your own version of that clarity. I hope you find the courage to stop being the resource for people who don't see your humanity. And most of all, I hope you have a year where the only walls being torn down are the ones that were keeping you from your own peace. The sun is beginning to set over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. It's a new year, a new world, and for the first time in 32 years, the air is perfectly clear. I think back to that Christmas dinner sometimes, not with bitterness, but with a sense of wonder at how close I came to staying in that trap. I think about the smell of the pot roast and the sound of the rain, and the way my mother laughed when she thought she was stealing my life. It feels like a movie I saw a long time ago, a story about someone I used to know. I wonder what they're doing right now. Is Arthur still blaming the illegal eviction? Is Martha still checking the mail for a check that's never coming? Is Chloe telling her baby stories about the Avil aunt who vanished into the night? Probably. People like them don't change. They just find new people to blame for the holes they dig themselves into. But their stories are no longer my responsibility. I've resigned from the role of the villain in their drama, and I've retired from the role of the hero. I'm just Alina now, and that is more than enough. As I watch the first stars appear over the Mediterranean, I realize that the greatest gift I ever gave myself wasn't the penthouse, or the career, or the money. It was the silence. It was the absolute, unshakable knowledge that I am the only one who holds the keys to my life. And this time I'm not leaving a spare under the mat. To everyone listening, I want to leave you with one thought as you navigate this new year. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They are the gates that protect the beauty you've built inside. Don't be afraid to lock them. Don't be afraid to walk away from a table where respect is never served. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Thank you for listening to the echoes of a life reclaimed. From my quiet corner of the world to yours, Happy New Year. May your 2026 be a year of radical honesty, profound peace, and the kind of freedom that only comes when you finally stop trying to save people who are busy drowning you. The tide is coming in now, washing the shore clean. Just like I did, just like you can. Take a deep breath. The air is better out here. I remember the specific moment the shift happened, the exact second my soul checked out of the family business. It wasn't when I heard Marcus talk about the air quality for the baby. It wasn't even when my father mentioned squatters' rights. It was the laugh. That sharp, pleased laugh from my mother. It was the sound of someone who took joy in the idea of me being homeless in a foreign country while they lived in my luxury. It was the sound of a predator who had forgotten that even the most docile prey has teeth. In my line of work, we call it a black swan event. It's an unpredictable occurrence that has a massive impact and is often inappropriately rationalized after the fact with the benefit of hindsight. To my family, my disappearance was a black swan. They never saw it coming because they were blinded by their own narcissism. They truly believed I was an infinite well, but every well has a bottom. I think about the gifts. I left them often. I wonder which one they opened first. I suspect it was Marcus. He was always the greediest, the most impatient. I can see him tearing the gold ribbon, his mind already calculating the resale value of whatever luxury item he thought was inside. The look on his face when he saw the debt transfer documents. I imagine it was the same look he had when his crypto mining rig caught fire in his garage. Pure, unadulterated shock that the world wasn't bending to his will. And my father, Arthur, a man who built his entire identity on being the patriarch, the one who made the rules. He spent his life navigating the gray areas of union contracts and pension funds, always looking for a way to do less and get more. He thought he was playing a masterstroke by moving Chloe into my place. He thought he was a chess player. He didn't realize I had already flipped the board and sold the table. There's a specific kind of freedom that comes from being the villain in a toxic person's story. It's a weightless feeling. Once you accept that they will never see the truth, that they will always paint you as the monster to justify their own failures, you stop trying to explain yourself. You stop seeking a closure that they are incapable of providing. I don't need them to understand. I don't need them to apologize. I don't even need them to be happy. I just need them to be away. In the weeks after the demolition, Silas sent me a photo. It was a shot of the penthouse after the first day of work. The interior walls were gone, exposing the raw, industrial skeleton of the building. Dust was everywhere, and the sunlight was streaming through the windows, hitting the bare concrete floors. It looked beautiful. It looked like a clean slate. Remodel is going well, Silas had texted. Found some interesting stuff behind the drywall in the bedroom. Looks like someone tried to hide a bunch of empty champagne bottles and a nursery mood board. We tossed it all. I had smiled at that. A nursery mood board. Chloe had been so sure, she had been so confident in her theft, that she had already started decorating. She had spent her last few dollars on dreams of a life she hadn't earned. I hope the new owner loves that space. I hope they fill it with laughter that isn't transactional. I hope the air quality is indeed perfect for whatever family ends up there. It's a good building. It just needed to be purged of the ghosts. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I was too harsh. I think about Chloe and the baby. I think about my parents getting older in a cramped apartment. But then I remember the rain in Chicago. I remember the feeling of my coat soaking through as I listened to them plot to change my locks. I remember that they weren't just taking a room. They were taking my safety. They were taking the one place in the world where I felt I could breathe. If I had let them stay, I wouldn't have been helping them. I would have been enabling their destruction. Marcus would have never looked for a job. Chloe would have never learned to live within her means. My parents would have continued to bleed me dry until there was nothing left but a bitter, hollowed-out version of myself. By saying no, I gave them a chance to finally become adults. It's a painful chance, yes. It's a cold, hard reality check of a chance. But it's the only one they have left. As for me, I'm learning the language of the birds in my garden. I'm learning how to cook for one without feeling lonely. I'm learning that my value isn't tied to my net worth or my ability to solve other people's problems. I am a quantitative risk architect who finally calculated the most important variable of all, my own happiness. The sun has fully dipped below the horizon now, leaving a trail of deep indigo and soft pink. The lights of the village below are beginning to twinkle, like a reflection of the stars above. It's a beautiful night to be alive. It's a beautiful night to be free. I'll say it one more time because it feels so good to say Happy New Year. To 2026, the year of consequences, the year of clarity, the year of us. Stay safe out there. Keep your keys close, and never, ever let someone else move into the sanctuary you worked so hard to build. You've earned your peace. Now, go out and live it. I've been thinking about the concept of family equity that my father mentioned that night. It's a fascinating term, isn't it? The idea that because we share blood, we share a bank account, that my hard work is a communal asset, but their failures are my private burden. It's a philosophy built on the exploitation of the responsible. In the financial world, if a partner consistently drains the capital of a firm without contributing, they are removed. It's not personal, it's survival. If the firm keeps that partner, the entire entity collapses. For years, I had been trying to keep a failing firm afloat. I was the CEO, the investor, and the janitor. I was doing all the work while the shareholders sat back and complained that the dividends weren't high enough. Selling the penthouse was my way of declaring bankruptcy on that firm. I liquidated the assets, paid off the necessary debts, and closed the doors. The debris, the foreman mentioned, that was the most poetic part. To the construction crew, my family's presence was just an obstacle to the real work. Their residency was just clutter. Their drama was just noise. It was a perspective I desperately needed. To the rest of the world, my family wasn't the center of the universe. They were just people who didn't belong in a building they didn't own. I wonder if Marcus ever got that disruptive tech firm off the ground. Probably not. Disruptors usually require a foundation to push against, and Marcus never built one. He was a man made of steam and mirrors, always looking for a shortcut to a destination he didn't understand. And Chloe, I hope the baby is healthy. I truly do, but I also hope that baby grows up in a house where words like work and responsibility and earning are more than just abstract concepts. I hope that child never has to overhear their parents planning to steal from someone who loves them. The letter she sent, the one about playing God, it's a classic tactic. When you can no longer control someone, you try to control how others see them. You try to make them feel guilty for their own survival, but you can't drown someone who has already learned to breathe underwater. I spent my life afraid of their judgment. I spent my life afraid of being the cold one. But now that I'm here on this terrace in this silence, I realize that cold is just a word people use for someone they can no longer burn for warmth. I'll take the cold. I'll take the ice. I'll take the winter if it means I never have to feel that suffocating, pine-scented humidity again. The village clock is striking the hour. It's a deep, resonant sound that echoes across the valley. It's a reminder that time keeps moving, regardless of who is happy and who is not. It's a reminder that we only get a certain number of hours, a certain number of years, and we have to decide who gets to share them. I've made my decision. As you sit wherever you are, maybe in a car, maybe in a quiet room, maybe in a busy city, I want you to think about your own penthouse. What is the thing you've built that people are trying to take from you? What is the sanctuary you're defending? Is it your time, your peace of mind, your financial security, your joy? Whatever it is, know that it's yours. You don't owe anyone a piece of your soul just because you happen to share a last name. You don't owe anyone your future just because they've wasted their past. Be the architect of your own life. Calculate the risks. Eliminate the liabilities. And when the time comes to walk away, don't look back. The view from the other side is worth every sledgehammer blow it took to get here. One final time, Happy New Year. Here's to 2026. Here's to the truth. And here's to the beautiful, terrifying, wonderful freedom of starting over. I'm gonna go inside now. I have a book to read, a glass of wine to finish, and a long, quiet night ahead of me. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly who has the keys to my front door. Just me. And that is the best gift of all. Good night, wherever you are. And thank you for listening to my story. It's a story with a satisfying end, not because everyone got what they wanted, but because everyone got what they earned. And in the end, that's the only kind of justice that matters. The rain has stopped in Chicago, I'm sure. The snow will be falling now, covering the tracks of the vans and the demolition crews. The penthouse will be a shell waiting for its new life. And I am here in the sun, finally home. The cycle is broken. The debt is paid. The risk is neutralized. I am free. And as we step into this brand new year, I hope you find that same feeling. I hope you find the place where the air is clear and the silence is your friend. Happy New Year, my friends. Happy 2026. Let's make it a year to remember, for all the right reasons. I'll be here in the garden, watching the stars, and I won't be answering any missed calls. Not a single one, because some stories don't need a sequel. They just need a final, beautiful period, and this is mine, the end.